The strings vibrated against her calloused fingertips as Chen tucked the violin beneath her chin, positioning herself behind the industrial dishwasher in the cramped back room of Romano's diner. Steam rose from the machine like morning fog, muffling the sound she was about to create. Her uniform, a coffee-stained polyester dress that had seen better decades, clung to her shoulders as she raised the bow. This was her sanctuary, this humid corner where grease-scented air mixed with the faint aroma of industrial soap. She closed her eyes and began to play. The melody that emerged was Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major, but it wasn't the polished, pristine version that graced concert halls. This was raw, desperate, beautiful in its imperfection. Each note carried the weight of 18-hour shifts, the ache of swollen feet, the dreams that lived in the spaces between sleep and waking. The bow danced across the strings with a fluidity that seemed impossible given the cramped quarters, her body swaying slightly as muscle memory took over from years of practice in stolen moments. "Maya, table 6 needs their coffee refilled." The shout from the front cut through her reverie like a blade through silk. She lowered the violin, the last notes hanging in the steamy air like a prayer that might go unanswered. Her reflection stared back from the chrome surface of the dishwasher, 26 years old but looking older, with tired eyes that still held flecks of the wonder she'd possessed as a child prodigy, the same eyes that had once gazed up at her violin teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, as she explained how Maya's small hands were perfectly shaped for the instrument. "Come and Rita," Maya called back, carefully placing the violin, her grandfather's 1934 German instrument, with its honey-colored wood and hairline crack down the back, into its weathered case. The case itself told a story, covered in travel stickers from a life unlived, dreams of European conservatories that had faded like the stickers themselves. She pushed through the swinging doors into the main dining area, where the familiar chaos of the dinner rush engulfed her. Romano's diner was a slice of old New York, the kind of place where truckers shared tables with night shift nurses, where the fluorescent lights hummed a constant tune, and where the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, their surfaces cracked and repaired with silver duct tape that caught the light from the neon sign outside. Maya had worked here for 3 years, ever since her mother's medical bills had consumed what little savings they'd managed to accumulate. Before that, she'd been a music teacher at Jefferson Elementary, making barely enough to survive, but at least living within the realm of her passion. Now, music existed only in these stolen moments, in the 15-minute breaks when she could escape to the back room with her grandfather's violin. "Earth to Maya!" Rita Kowalski, the night manager, snapped her fingers in front of her face. Rita was 50-something with hair the color of aged copper and a voice roughened by decades of cigarettes and shouting over diner noise. She'd been working at Romano since Maya was in elementary school, and despite her gruff exterior, she'd become something like a surrogate mother. "You got that dreamy look again. Table 6, coffee, now." Maya nodded, grabbing the coffee pot from the warmer. As she moved through the maze of tables, she caught fragments of conversations, a couple arguing about money, a trucker talking to someone on a cell phone about delivery schedules, an elderly man reading a newspaper and muttering about the state of the world. These people had become familiar, their faces changing but their stories remaining remarkably similar. Everyone struggling, everyone trying to make it through another day. Table 6 held a man she'd never seen before, someone who didn't fit the usual Romano's demographic. He wore a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months, and his hands, manicured, soft, suggested a life far removed from manual labor. He was maybe 60, with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Those eyes looked up as she approached with the coffee pot.
"More coffee, sir?" Maya asked, forcing the professional smile that had become second nature. "Please." His voice was cultured, with the kind of accent that spoke of private schools and international travel. As she poured, he continued, "I couldn't help but notice. Was that Tchaikovsky I heard coming from the back?" Maya's hand froze, nearly causing the coffee to overflow. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't think anyone could hear—" "The violin," he clarified, leaning forward slightly. "That was extraordinary. Do you play professionally?" Heat rose to Maya's cheeks. No, sir. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. I only play during my breaks, and I thought—" "Disturbed me?" He shook his head, a genuine smile spreading across his features. "Young lady, that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in months. The raw emotion in your playing. It's rare to hear such passion." Maya glanced around nervously, aware that other customers were starting to look their way. Rita stood behind the counter, arms crossed, clearly wondering why Maya was having an extended conversation instead of working. "Thank you, sir, but I should really—" "My name is Alexander Whitmore, and I'd very much like to hear more of your playing if you'd be willing." The name sent a jolt through Maya's system. Alexander Whitmore. She'd seen that name in newspapers, magazines, on the sides of buildings. Whitmore Industries, Whitmore Foundation, Whitmore Concert Hall. He was one of those people who existed in a different stratosphere, whose decisions affected thousands of lives, whose net worth was measured in numbers too large for most people to comprehend. Mr. Whitmore, I can't—" "I'm working," she stammered, acutely aware of how ridiculous she must sound. "Of course," he said, his eyes kind but intense. "But perhaps when your shift ends, I'd be happy to wait." Before Maya could respond, a commotion erupted from the kitchen. The sound of shattering dishes echoed through the diner, followed by Tommy Restrepo's voice raised in anger. Tommy was the night cook, a 22-year-old kid from the Bronx who'd been trying to save money for community college. He was also Maya's closest friend at the diner, someone who covered for her when she needed those musical breaks. "I didn't break nothing," Tommy's voice cracked with frustration. "The plate was already chipped." "Jerry, come on," Maya interjected, stepping between them. "Tommy is one of the most careful people here. If he says the plate was already damaged, oh great, now the singing waitress wants to play manager. Maybe you should worry about your own job before you start defending other people." The words stung because they carried an undertone of threat. Maya knew Jerry had been looking for reasons to cut staff, to increase his profit margins. She also knew that her breaks, her violin playing, had not been unnoticed by management. Tommy's shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's fine, Maya. I'll pay for the plates." But it wasn't fine. Maya could see the calculation in Tommy's eyes. $20 for broken dishes meant $20 less towards his tuition, $20 closer to being trapped in this place forever. She thought about her grandfather, who had arrived in New York with nothing but his violin and a dream of making music. He'd worked in factories during the day and played in small clubs at night, saving every penny to buy the instrument that now sat in her locker. "Actually," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt, "the plates were already damaged. I saw the chips yesterday when I was putting them away. Tommy shouldn't have to pay for something that was already broken." Jerry's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? And I suppose you have witnesses to back up your story?" Before Maya could respond, a voice came from behind her. "Actually, I believe she does." Alexander Whitmore stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, his presence somehow commanding despite the informal setting. "I couldn't help but overhear. I was sitting at table 6, and I noticed several plates with chips and cracks being used throughout the evening. The young man here, Tommy, is it, was handling the dinnerware with exceptional care." Jerry's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple. Being contradicted by a customer, especially one who clearly came from money, was not something his ego could easily handle. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but this is an internal matter." "Of course, I certainly don't want to interfere with your business practices. Though I should mention, I'm always interested in establishments that treat their employees fairly. It says something about the character of a place." The implication hung in the air like smoke.
Jerry's eyes darted between Whitmore's expensive clothes and composed demeanor, clearly calculating whether this was someone worth antagonizing. For a moment, he stepped back. "Fine," Jerry muttered. "Tommy doesn't pay for the plates, but I want everyone to be more careful with the dinnerware. We can't afford to keep replacing dishes." As Jerry stalked away, Tommy looked between Maya and Whitmore with confusion and gratitude. "Thanks, Maya. And thank you, sir. I really couldn't afford to lose that money." Whitmore nodded. "Think nothing of it. Though I am curious. Community college, you mentioned?" Tommy's face lit up despite the earlier confrontation. "Yeah, I'm trying to save up for the culinary arts program at Borough Community College. I want to be a real chef someday, not just a short-order cook." "That's admirable," Whitmore said. "Follow your passion. It's the only way to find true fulfillment in life." As Tommy returned to his station and Whitmore headed back to the dining room, Maya felt a strange sense of displacement. In the space of 10 minutes, her world had shifted in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Someone had stood up for Tommy, yes, but more than that, someone had heard her music and called it extraordinary. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and order-taking, but she remained acutely aware of Alexander Whitmore sitting at table 6. He ordered modestly, a bowl of soup and a sandwich, but he stayed far longer than necessary, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen as if hoping to hear more music. Other customers came and went, but he remained, reading what appeared to be sheet music he'd pulled from a leather portfolio. Maya found herself stealing glances at him throughout the evening. There was something in his demeanor that reminded her of Mrs. Rodriguez, her childhood violin teacher, an attentiveness, a way of listening that went beyond mere politeness. Mrs. Rodriguez had been the first person to tell Maya she had the gift, that her relationship with the violin was something rare and precious.
As closing time approached, Maya's nervousness grew. Would he really wait? And if so, what could he possibly want from her? She was a diner waitress who played violin in her spare time, not some undiscovered prodigy. Those dreams belonged to her younger self, the girl who had won state competitions and been accepted to Juilliard before life had intervened. Rita began the closing routine, wiping down tables and counting the register. "Maya, you can go ahead and clock out," she said. "I'll finish up here." Maya hesitated. "Rita, there's a customer who... he wanted to talk to me after my shift." Rita's eyes immediately went to Whitmore, who was quietly organizing his sheet music. "That guy? He's been nursing the same cup of coffee for 3 hours. What's he want?" I think it's about music." Rita's expression softened. She knew about Maya's background, about the dreams that had been set aside for practical necessities. "Well, just be careful, honey. Rich guys don't usually hang around diners to discuss music with the help." But as Maya approached table 6, she saw that Whitmore had laid out several sheets of music on the table, complex violin concertos, pieces she recognized from her conservatory days. His eyes were bright with an enthusiasm that seemed genuine. "Miss," she began. "Chen, Maya Chen." "Miss Chen, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I hope you don't mind, but I brought some music I thought you might find interesting." He gestured to the sheets. "I heard such sophistication in your playing earlier, such emotional depth. These pieces," he tapped one of the scores, "they require not just technical skill, but the ability to convey profound feeling. I believe you possess both." Maya's throat felt tight. The last time someone had talked to her about music this way, she'd been 21 and standing in the admissions office at Juilliard, holding the acceptance letter she'd never be able to accept. "Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate your kindness, but I think you may have the wrong impression. I'm not a professional musician. I work here, and I play for myself sometimes, but that's all." "Is it?" he asked gently. "Because what I heard tonight wasn't someone playing for themselves. That was someone communicating something essential, something that needed to be expressed. Music like that doesn't happen by accident."
Maya sank in from the booth across from him, suddenly exhausted. "Maybe once," she said quietly. "But that was a long time ago. I had opportunities. I was accepted to some good schools. But life happened. My mother got sick. There were bills, and I had to make choices." "And now?" "Now, I'm 26 years old, working double shifts to keep us afloat, and my violin sits in a locker most of the time." The words came out more bitter than she intended. Whitmore was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Maya," he said finally, "what if I told you that the choices you made, the sacrifices, they didn't end your musical journey? What if they were just preparing you for something different, something perhaps even more meaningful?" Before Maya could respond, the front door of the diner chimed, and a young woman entered. She was about Maya's age, impeccably dressed, with the kind of polished appearance that spoke of private schools and trust funds. She scanned the nearly empty diner until her eyes landed on Whitmore. "Dad, you said you'd be home by 9. It's almost midnight." Whitmore rose, his demeanor shifting slightly. "Sophie, I'd like you to meet Maya Chen. Maya, this is my daughter, Sophie." Sophie's smile was polite but distant, the kind reserved for service workers and brief encounters. "Nice to meet you, Maya. Dad, we really should go. You have the board meeting in the morning." "Of course," Whitmore said, but his attention remained focused on Maya. "Ms. Chen, would you be willing to consider something? I'd like to arrange for you to audition for the New York Philharmonic's Community Outreach Program. They're always looking for talented musicians to perform in schools, community centers." Maya's heart leaped and sank simultaneously. I couldn't possibly. I work 6 days a week, and the training alone would require—" "I'd be happy to discuss the practical arrangements with your employer, and there would be a stipend during the training period, enough to cover your current wages." Sophie shifted impatiently beside her father, clearly uncomfortable with the extended conversation. Maya caught the look that passed between them, a familiar dynamic she recognized from her own life, the tension between dreams and obligations. I need to think about it," Maya said finally. Whitmore reached into his coat and withdrew a business card. "Of course. But Maya, I want you to know something. In 40 years of attending concerts, supporting the arts, hearing the world's finest musicians, what I heard tonight moved me in a way that reminded me why music matters. Don't let that gift go unused." As the Whitmores left, Maya sat alone in the empty diner, holding the business card. The silence felt different now, charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. Through the windows, she could see the city continuing its eternal dance. Late-night workers heading home, early morning workers beginning their day, the great wheel of necessity that had trapped her for so long. But something had changed. Someone had heard her music and called it a gift. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to her mother's number, her thumb hovering over the call button. Her mother, who had sacrificed her own dreams to raise Maya alone, who had worked 3 jobs to pay for violin lessons, who cried the day Maya told her she couldn't accept the Juilliard scholarship. The phone rang once, twice. "Maya? Sweetheart, is everything okay? It's so late." "Mom," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. "Something happened tonight. Something impossible." Maya's apartment was a testament to dreams deferred and necessities prioritized. The studio space in Washington Heights cost more than she could comfortably afford, but it was home to both her and her mother, Elena Chen. Tonight, as Maya quietly turned the key, she could hear the familiar sound of her mother's labored breathing from the fold-out couch that served as Elena's bed. The oxygen concentrator hummed its mechanical lullaby, a sound that had become the backdrop to their lives since Elena's diagnosis with pulmonary fibrosis 3 years ago. Maya set down her purse and violin case with practiced quiet, navigating the narrow path between the medical equipment and the small dining table where Elena did her bookkeeping work for local businesses. Even in her illness, Elena insisted on contributing to their household income, hunched over ledgers and receipts with the same meticulous attention she'd once applied to her job as a school administrator. The refrigerator's gentle hum joined the oxygen machine's rhythm as Maya opened it to find the usual sparse contents: leftover takeout from 2 days ago, a carton of milk nearing expiration, some vegetables that Elena had optimistically bought during her last good day. Maya had learned to shop day by day, meal by meal, budgeting not just money, but energy, her own and her mother's. She pulled out ingredients for tomorrow's breakfast, her mind still spinning from the encounter with Alexander Whitmore. The business card sat in her pocket like a small coal, warming and burning simultaneously. Part of her wanted to wake Elena immediately to share the impossible conversation that had just occurred. But her mother needed sleep more than she needed hope, and Maya had learned to be careful with hope. The violin case called to her from where she'd set it by the door. During the day, while Elena napped and Maya had the apartment to herself, she would sometimes practice with a mute on the strings, the sound reduced to barely a whisper. But tonight she wanted, no, needed to hear the full voice of the instrument. Maya climbed the narrow stairway to the building's roof, carrying her grandfather's violin like precious cargo. The rooftop had become her concert hall over the past year, the place where she could play without disturbing neighbors or worrying about complaints. The city spread out before her, a constellation of windows and dreams, each light representing someone's struggles and aspirations. She positioned herself near the eastern edge, where the Manhattan skyline provided a backdrop of impossible beauty. As she raised the violin to her chin, she thought about her grandfather, Chen, who had made this same journey from China to America with nothing but this instrument and an unshakable belief in the power of music. He'd told her stories of playing in the parks of Beijing as a young man, of the way music had sustained him through war and displacement, of how every note was a prayer sent into the universe. Tonight, Maya played Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor, but she played it as she heard it, not as it appeared on the page, but as it lived in her heart. The melody soared over the sleeping city, each phrase carrying the weight of her daily reality and the lightness of her persistent dreams. She thought about Tommy in the kitchen, saving his tips for culinary school. She thought about Rita, who'd been managing the diner for 20 years and still lit up when she talked about her grandson's piano recitals. She thought about all the people carrying music inside them, all the dreams that survived despite circumstances designed to crush them. As she played, Maya noticed a figure emerge onto a nearby rooftop, an elderly man with his own instrument, a saxophone, that caught the streetlight's gleam. He nodded to her across the space between buildings and began to play a soft counter-melody to her concerto. This was the city she knew, the one where music happened in unexpected places, where artists found each other across rooftops and through windows, creating community in the spaces between formal institutions. When the last notes faded into the night air, Maya felt the familiar mixture of fulfillment and loss that followed these rooftop sessions. The music was real, it mattered, it connected her to something larger than the daily grind of survival. But in the morning, she would still wake up to the sound of the oxygen machine, still count pills and ration energy, still pour coffee for strangers who saw her as invisible. Maya had never been able to hide anything from her mother. Elena possessed the supernatural ability of all good teachers to read the subtle signs, posture changes, vocal inflections, the space between words that revealed more than the words themselves.
There was a customer tonight, Maya began, then found herself recounting the entire evening. Alana listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing brighter as the story progressed. When Maya finished, Alana was quiet for a long moment. "Alexander Whitmore," Alana said finally. "I know that name." "Everyone knows that name, Mom. He's famous for being rich." "No, mija. I know that name from the education world. His foundation funds music programs in public schools. When I was still working, before—" Elena gestured vaguely at the medical equipment surrounding them, "before all this, his foundation saved the music program at Jefferson Elementary. Full funding for instruments, teacher salaries, everything." Maya felt something shift in her chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were already carrying enough weight. You didn't need to know about every opportunity that passed by." Elena's voice carried a note of regret that Maya recognized, the same tone she'd used when explaining why Maya couldn't accept the Juilliard scholarship. "Mom." "Maya, listen to me." Elena struggled to sit up straighter, and Maya moved to adjust her pillows. "Your grandfather came to this country with nothing but his violin and his dreams. I came to New York with a teaching degree and the determination to give you better opportunities than I'd had. You've been so busy taking care of me that you've forgotten you were supposed to take care of the music, too." "The music doesn't pay for your medications," Maya said quietly. "It doesn't keep the lights on or put food in the refrigerator." "And what happens when I'm gone?" Elena's question hung in the air like a challenge. "What happens to the music then?" Maya felt tears threaten, the same conversation they'd had dozens of times taking on new urgency in light of the evening's encounter. "Mom, don't talk like that." "Maya, I'm dying." Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, free of self-pity. "We both know it. The doctors have been very clear about the timeline. And the thought that terrifies me most isn't leaving you. It's leaving you with nothing but obligations and regrets." Maya reached for her mother's hand, feeling the papery skin and prominent bones that spoke of illness and medication side effects. "You're not leaving me with nothing. You're leaving me with everything that matters." "Including the music," Elena said firmly. "Including the responsibility to honor the gift you were given." Maya wanted to argue, to explain the practical realities that made musical careers impossible for people like them. But she thought about the expression on Alexander Whitmore's face when he'd heard her playing, the genuine recognition in his eyes. She thought about the sheet music he had brought, the sophisticated pieces that had once been part of her daily practice routine. "What if I fail? What if you don't try?" The question echoed in the small apartment long after Alana had fallen asleep. Maya sat in the darkness, listening to the oxygen machine and the distant sounds of the city, turning Alexander Whitmore's business card over in her hands. The card was heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of thing that represented a world she'd glimpsed but never inhabited. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from Tommy. "Thanks for having my back tonight. That rich dude was cool. You think he'll come back?" She stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Would Alexander Whitmore come back? And more importantly, what would Maya do if he did?
Maya's alarm went off at 6 a.m., the same time it had gone off every morning for 3 years. She moved through her routine with automatic precision. Check Ilana's oxygen levels, prepare medications, make coffee strong enough to fuel an 18-hour day. Ilana was still sleeping, her breathing slightly labored but stable. The apartment felt smaller in the morning light, the medical equipment more intrusive, the evidence of their constrained circumstances more apparent. Maya showered quickly in the bathroom that doubled as a storage space for Ilana's supplies, then dressed in her uniform for the morning shift at Romano's. The diner served a different clientele during breakfast hours: construction workers grabbing coffee before job sites, office workers who preferred the authenticity of the neighborhood place over corporate chains, elderly regulars who came for the company as much as the food. Maya had requested extra shifts this week to cover the cost of Ilana's new medication, a more effective treatment that insurance covered only partially. The math was always tight, always requiring creative solutions and small sacrifices. Maya had learned to find protein bars on sale, to stretch meals, to make every dollar count twice. The walk to work took her through a neighborhood in transition, where gentrification crept forward in fits and starts. New high-rise buildings cast shadows over century-old tenements. Artisanal coffee shops opened next to bodegas that had served the same families for decades. Maya understood the tension because she lived it, caught between the world she'd been born into and the world she occasionally glimpsed through her music. At Romano's, the morning rush was already in full swing. Rita had been there since 5 a.m., prepping for the day, her movements efficient and economical. Tommy worked the breakfast grill with the focused intensity of someone who understood that every order mattered. Every tip counted toward his future. "Morning, Maya," Rita called out. "You sleep okay? You looked pretty rattled when you left last night." Maya tied her apron and grabbed her order pad. "I'm fine, just tired." But she wasn't fine, and Rita's sharp eyes didn't miss the signs of internal turmoil. Maya moved through the morning routine, coffee refills, order taking, the familiar dance of service, while her mind replayed the conversation with Alexander Whitmore and the subsequent talk with her mother. During her break, Maya stepped outside into the narrow alley behind the diner. The space was cramped and unglamorous, bordered by dumpsters and fire escapes, but it offered a moment of privacy. She pulled out her phone and stared at Whitmore's business card, the numbers and letters that might represent a doorway or a dead end. Her thumb hovered over the phone's keypad. What would she say? "Hello, Mr. Whitmore, this is the waitress you met last night. Thank you for your offer, but I can't possibly. I've been thinking about what you said." The back door opened, and Tommy emerged with a cigarette and a look of frustration. "Jerry's been in a mood all morning, talking about cutting hours, reducing staff. I think last night really got to him." Maya felt a stab of guilt. "Tommy, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gotten involved in the argument about the plates." "Are you kidding?" Tommy took a long drag. "You probably saved my job. That rich guy backing up our story, Jerry couldn't argue with that." He paused, studying Maya's expression. "You gonna call him?" "Who?" "Come on, Maya. I saw the way that dude was looking at you. Heard him talking about your music. He gave you his number, didn't he?" Maya pulled out the business card. "He wants me to audition for some community outreach program with the Philharmonic?" Tommy's eyes widened. "That's incredible! Maya, that's your dream, right?" "I don't have dreams anymore," Maya said automatically. "I have responsibilities." "That's bullshit, and you know it." Tommy's voice carried an edge of anger. "You think I don't dream about getting out of this place? You think I don't lie awake at night imagining my own restaurant? But I'm still saving for culinary school because the dream matters more than the fear." Maya looked at her friend, really looked at him. Tommy was younger than her, came from circumstances that made her own struggles seem manageable, and yet he carried himself with a determination that she recognized from her younger self. "What if I fail the audition?" Maya asked. "What if you don't get the chance to fail because you never tried?" The same question her mother had posed, coming from a different source, but carrying the same weight. Maya realized that the people around her, Elena, Tommy, even Rita in her gruff way, were all trying to push her toward the same precipice, the place where comfort ended and possibility began. Maya's phone rang, the sound startling in the narrow alley. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, and for a wild moment she wondered if Alexander Whitmore had somehow anticipated her internal debate. "Hello? Miss Chen? This is David Martinez from the New York Philharmonic's Community Outreach Division. Alexander Whitmore asked me to call you about a possible audition opportunity." Yes, Mr. Whitmore mentioned something about that. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? I understand you work during the day, but Mr. Whitmore emphasized that we should work around your schedule." Maya looked at Tommy, who was clearly eavesdropping, and nodding enthusiastically. I get off work at 3 today." "Perfect. Could you come to Lincoln Center at 4? We'll arrange for you to use one of our practice rooms, and we can discuss the program details." After Maya hung up, Tommy ground out his cigarette with obvious excitement. "This is happening, isn't it? This is really happening." Maya felt the familiar mixture of terror and exhilaration, the same feeling she'd experienced before important competitions as a teenager. "I need to tell Rita I might be late for the evening shift." "Maya," said Tommy seriously, "what if this is it? What if this is the break you've been waiting for?" Maya didn't answer, but as she walked back into the diner, she found herself thinking about her grandfather's violin, waiting patiently in its case. The instrument had survived war, displacement, decades of uncertainty, and it had never stopped being capable of making music. Perhaps the same was true for the person who played it. The Lincoln Center Plaza stretched before Maya like an ocean of possibility and intimidation. She had arrived 20 minutes early, partly from nervousness and partly because she wanted to absorb the atmosphere. Students from Juilliard hurried past carrying instrument cases, their purposeful strides and confident postures marking them as inhabitants of this world rather than visitors. Maya clutched her grandfather's violin case and tried to ignore the voice in her head cataloging all the ways she didn't belong. The Metropolitan Opera House rose to her left, its grand arches and crystal chandeliers visible through the massive windows, and to her right, Avery Fisher Hall, now David Geffen Hall, where the New York Philharmonic performed for audiences who paid more for a single ticket than Maya made in a week. She had walked through this plaza before, usually on her way to somewhere else, but she had never entered as someone with legitimate business here.
David Martinez met her at the artist's entrance, a compact man in his 40s with kind eyes and calloused fingers that spoke of a lifetime spent with stringed instruments. "Miss Chen, I'm David. Thank you for coming on such short notice." As they walked through corridors lined with photographs of legendary performers, David explained the community outreach program. "We bring music education to schools, community centers, hospitals, places where people might not otherwise encounter classical music. It's not just about performance. We need musicians who can teach, who can connect with diverse audiences, who can make this music accessible." Maya nodded, though her attention was partially divided by the surroundings. Practice rooms lined the hallways, and through the small windows she could see musicians at work, a cellist running through scales, a flutist working on a particularly challenging passage, a pianist whose fingers moved with mechanical precision across the keys. The position would be part-time initially, but there's potential for expansion based on performance and community response. The starting salary is modest but steady, and there are opportunities for additional income through private lessons and weekend workshops. They stopped at a practice room door, and David handed Maya a key. "Take as much time as you need to warm up. I'll be back in 30 minutes to hear you play, and then we can discuss the practical details." Alone in the practice room, Maya felt the weight of the moment settle around her like a familiar coat. The room was small but acoustically designed, with excellent lighting and a quality that made every note resonate with clarity. She opened her grandfather's violin case with trembling hands, the familiar ritual of preparation taking on heightened significance. The violin felt different here, as if it remembered being in such spaces. Maya rosined her bow carefully, checked the tuning, and began with simple scales, the foundation exercises that Mrs. Rodriguez had drilled into her as a child. Slowly, the nervous energy in her body transformed into musical energy, flowing through her arms and into the strings. She moved into Bach's Partita No. 2, the piece she had performed at her high school graduation when her future had seemed limitless. The notes filled the practice room, each phrase a conversation between her present self and the girl she had once been. As she played, Maya felt the years of serving tables and counting pills and measuring medications fall away. This was who she was beneath the uniform and the worry lines,
a musician who had never really stopped being a musician. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. David Martinez entered with another man, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Maya, I'd like you to meet Dr. James Patterson, our Director of Community Programs. Dr. Patterson was Alexander Whitmore's professor at Yale, and he's been eager to hear you play." Dr. Patterson extended his hand with a warmth that immediately put Maya at ease. "Mr. Whitmore speaks very highly of your abilities. He said you brought him to tears in a diner, which is no small feat. Alexander has heard the world's greatest musicians." Maya felt her cheeks flush. I'm sure he was being kind. Alexander Whitmore is many things, but overly kind about musical ability is not one of them. May we hear something? Maya positioned her violin and decided on Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, the same piece she had performed on the rooftop the night before. But as she began, something unexpected happened. The emotions of the past 24 hours, the encounter with Whitmore, the conversation with her mother, the possibility of change, poured through her playing with an intensity that surprised even her. She wasn't just playing notes on a page. She was telling the story of every late-night rooftop session, every stolen moment of music between double shifts, every dream that had been deferred but never abandoned. The violin sang with a voice that was distinctly hers, technically accomplished but emotionally raw, polished but not sanitized.
When the last note faded, the silence in the room felt alive. Dr. Patterson and David exchanged a look that Maya couldn't quite interpret. "Remarkable," Dr. Patterson said finally. "You have exceptional technical skills, but more importantly, you have something that can't be taught. The ability to make people feel the music, not just hear it." David nodded enthusiastically. "This is exactly what our community programs need, musicians who can connect with people from all backgrounds, who understand struggle and hope." Maya felt a surge of excitement, quickly followed by panic. I should mention that I've never done any teaching, and I work full-time at a restaurant. My mother is ill and—" "Maya," Dr. Patterson interrupted gently, "let us worry about the logistics. The question is, do you want this opportunity?" The question hung in the air like a musical phrase waiting for resolution. Maya thought about her mother's words from the night before, about Tommy's determination to save for culinary school, about all the music that lived inside her, waiting to be shared. "Yes," she said, the word emerging stronger than she felt. "Yes, I want this." The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and scheduling discussions. The position would begin part-time, 15 hours a week, visiting 3 different community centers and 1 elementary school. The salary would be enough to replace her morning shifts at Romano's, though she would need to keep working evenings initially. As Maya walked back through Lincoln Center Plaza, her mind raced with the implications of what had just occurred. She had a job, a real job in music. Not the career she had once dreamed of, but something meaningful, something that would allow her to use her abilities while still meeting her obligations to Elena. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost missed the familiar figure sitting on one of the plaza benches. Alexander Whitmore rose as she approached, his expression expectant. "How did it go?" he asked. "Mr. Whitmore, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to hear how the audition went, and please, call me Alexander." His smile was genuinely pleased. "From your expression, I'm guessing it went well?" Maya found herself grinning despite her usual reserve. "I got the position. I start Monday." "That's wonderful news." Alexander's pleasure seemed entirely genuine, free of the condescension Maya had learned to expect from wealthy people trying to appear charitable. "You deserve this opportunity, Maya. Your talent deserves to be shared." They walked together toward the subway entrance, and Maya found herself opening up about the logistics, the scheduling challenges, her concerns about Elena, the financial complexities of transitioning between jobs. "If I may,"
Alexander said as they reached the subway stairs. "I'd like to make a suggestion. The Whitmore Foundation has a program that provides support for musicians transitioning into community education roles. It's not charity, it's an investment in cultural outreach. Would you consider applying?" Maya paused at the top of the stairs. What kind of support? Financial assistance during the transition period, health insurance supplements for family members, even help with transportation and equipment if needed. Alexander's tone was factual, professional. Musicians shouldn't have to choose between their calling and their family obligations. Maya felt tears threaten, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her circumstances. 24 hours ago, she was a waitress with a secret musical life. Now she was being offered opportunities that seemed too good to be true. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this for someone you just met?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, watching the flow of people entering and exiting the subway. "My wife was a musician, a pianist. She had extraordinary talent, but she came from circumstances similar to yours. She had to choose between music and financial survival, and she chose survival. She worked as a secretary for 40 years, raised our children, and played piano only for herself."
He paused, his expression distant. Margaret died 2 years ago, and in her final weeks, she told me that her biggest regret wasn't the career she never had, it was the music she never shared, the children who never heard her play, the audiences who never experienced her gift. He looked directly at Maya. "I can't bring Margaret back, but I can make sure other musicians don't face the same impossible choice." Maya felt the weight of his words, the responsibility and the opportunity they represented. What would I need to do? Apply for the foundation grant, continue with your community outreach work, and promise me that you won't let practical concerns stop you from sharing your music with the world. As Maya descended into the subway, Alexander Whitmore's card, tucked safely in her pocket, along with David Martinez's contact information, she felt as though she were entering a new chapter of her life. The train that carried her back to Washington Heights was the same one she had taken that morning, but she was not the same person who had boarded it. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "How did it go, mija?" She typed back, "I have so much to tell you." But as the train emerged from the tunnel into daylight, Maya noticed a man in the seat across from her who seemed to be watching her with unusual interest. He was middle-aged, wearing an expensive suit, and when their eyes met, he didn't look away. Something about his attention made Maya uncomfortable, though she couldn't articulate why. When she got off at her stop, the man exited as well, maintaining a distance but clearly following the same path. Maya's excitement about the day's developments was tempered by a growing sense of unease. She had spent enough time navigating the city to trust her instincts, and her instincts were telling her that something wasn't right. Maya took a circuitous route home, stopping at the bodega where she was known and spending longer than necessary selecting items she didn't need. Through the windows of the store, she saw the man loitering across the street, pretending to read his phone but clearly maintaining surveillance. Fear began to replace excitement as Maya considered the possibilities. Had someone discovered that she had been offered a position through the Whitmore Foundation? Was this about money, about the perception that she now had access to wealth? Or was it something else entirely? Maya purchased a bottle of water and left the bodega through the back exit, cutting through the alley behind the building. She made it 2 blocks before she saw the man again, this time accompanied by a woman in professional attire. They weren't trying to hide their presence anymore. Maya's hands shook as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Whatever was happening, it was connected to her encounter with Alexander Whitmore and the opportunities that had followed. The day that had begun with such promise was ending with the realization that some kinds of change came with unexpected consequences. She found Elena sitting at the kitchen table with her oxygen concentrator,
working on bookkeeping as usual. But her mother's expression was troubled, and Maya noticed that the evening medications, usually organized with military precision, remained scattered across the table. "Mom, what's wrong?" Elena looked up with eyes that held a mixture of fear and determination. "Maya, we need to talk. I received some very interesting phone calls today." Maya's stomach dropped. "What kind of phone calls?"
The first was from a reporter, asking about your relationship with Alexander Whitmore. The second was from someone claiming to represent his business interests, wanting to know about your background and financial situation. Elena's voice carried the steel that had made her an effective school administrator. The third was from Jerry Romano, telling me that my daughter was getting above herself and that certain people weren't happy about it. Maya sank into the chair across from her mother, the events of the day suddenly taking on a darker cast. "Mom, I don't understand. I got a job with the Philharmonic's community outreach program. It's legitimate. It's—" "Maya, listen to me." Elena reached across the table and gripped her daughter's hands. "Rich men don't typically spend their evenings in diners in Washington Heights. They don't offer opportunities to waitresses they've just met. And they certainly don't have their foundation start calling around about supporting said waitresses within 24 hours. The implications of Elena's words settled over Maya like a cold blanket. "You think Alexander was lying?" "I think Alexander Whitmore is a very wealthy man with interests we don't understand, and I think you may have gotten caught up in something larger than a simple act of musical appreciation." Maya's phone rang, startling both women. The caller ID showed Alexander Whitmore's number. "Don't answer it," Elena said immediately. But Maya's finger was already moving toward the accept button, driven by a need to understand what was happening. "Mr. Whitmore?" "Maya, thank God." Elena's voice was tight with worry. "Are you at home? Are you safe?" "Safe from what?" "There are people who—" "Maya, I should have warned you earlier, but I didn't think they would move this quickly. There are individuals who don't want me funding community programs, who see my foundation's work as a threat to their interests." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of threat?" "Political, primarily. There are people who benefit from keeping arts funding limited, who profit from the status quo. When I start providing opportunities to talented individuals from working-class backgrounds—" Maya's voice trailed off. "Maya, I'm sending a car to pick you up. You and your mother need to come to my office immediately." "I'm not going anywhere until you explain what's happening." Elena was watching Maya with an expression of growing alarm, clearly hearing only one side of a conversation that was becoming more disturbing by the moment. "Maya," Alexander said, his voice carrying a note of urgency she hadn't heard before, "there are people who will use you to get to me, and they won't hesitate to hurt you in the process. Please trust me. Let me explain everything in person, but not over the phone." Maya hung up the phone and looked at Elena. "Mom, we need to pack a bag." "Maya, what have you gotten us into?"
"I don't know," Maya said honestly. "But I think we're about to find out." As they hurriedly packed essential medications and overnight clothes, Maya caught glimpses through the window of figures watching the building from across the street. The man from the subway was there, along with the woman who had accompanied him later. They weren't hiding anymore. Elena moved slowly but with purpose, her teacher's instincts taking over in the face of crisis. "Maya, whatever happens next, remember that you are not responsible for other people's agendas. You played music. You auditioned for a job. You accepted an opportunity. None of this is your fault." Maya nodded, though guilt was already beginning to eat at her. Had her desire for a musical career somehow put her mother in danger? Had her willingness to trust Alexander Whitmore been naive to the point of recklessness? The black sedan arrived exactly when Alexander had promised. The driver, Marcus, was a professional-looking man who showed them identification and spoke in calm, reassuring tones. As they drove through the city toward Manhattan, Elena held Maya's hand with surprising strength. "Whatever happens," Elena whispered, "don't let them make you ashamed of your music. Don't let them make you believe that wanting more was wrong."
Maya squeezed her mother's hand and watched the city blur past the car windows. In the space of one day, she had gained a job, a mentor, and apparently a collection of enemies she didn't understand. The violin case sat across her lap, the same instrument that had started this entire sequence of events. As they pulled up to a gleaming office building in Midtown, Maya realized that there was no going back to the simple life of serving coffee and playing on rooftops. Whatever lay ahead, whatever Alexander Whitmore needed to explain, whatever dangers they faced, she was committed now to seeing it through. The question was whether the price of pursuing her musical dreams would prove higher than she was prepared to pay. Alexander Whitmore's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a midtown skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Manhattan. But Maya barely noticed the opulent surroundings as she and Elena were ushered into a conference room where Alexander waited with two other individuals, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, and a man whose bearing suggested military or law enforcement background. "Maya, Elena, thank you for coming," Alexander said, rising from his seat. "I know this must be frightening and confusing. Please let me introduce Sarah Chen. No relation, just coincidence. She's my chief legal counsel. And this is Detective Ray Morrison, NYPD, who's been investigating some threats against my foundation." Elena settled into a chair with careful dignity, her oxygen concentrator humming softly beside her. "Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate your concern for our safety, but I need to understand what we've gotten involved in." Sarah Chen opened a laptop and turned it toward Maya and Elena. "What I'm about to show you may be disturbing, but you need to understand the context of what's been happening." The laptop screen displayed newspaper articles, financial documents, and what appeared to be surveillance photographs. Maya's breath caught as she recognized images of herself, leaving Romano's diner, walking to the subway, entering Lincoln Center that afternoon. "For the past 6 months, we've been investigating a group that targets individuals who receive significant support from charitable foundations. They use intimidation, harassment, and sometimes violence to discourage people from accepting help, creating a climate of fear that ultimately undermines philanthropic efforts."
Maya stared at the screen, trying to process the information. "You're saying people are being attacked for accepting scholarships and grants?" "More specifically," Sarah Chen said, "they're targeting recipients who might serve as high-profile success stories. Musicians, artists, students who could inspire others and validate the effectiveness of foundation programs." Alexander leaned forward, his expression grave. "Maya, the moment I heard you play in that diner, I knew you had the potential to become a powerful advocate for arts education. Your story, working-class background, supporting an ill family member, maintaining extraordinary musical ability despite financial constraints, represents exactly the kind of narrative that demonstrates why foundation support matters." Elena spoke for the first time since the presentation began. "And that makes my daughter a target?" Detective Morrison nodded. "Unfortunately, yes. The group we're investigating has financial backing from individuals who profit from maintaining the status quo, people who benefit when arts programs remain underfunded, when talented individuals from working-class backgrounds don't receive opportunities." Maya felt sick. So everything that happened yesterday, the audition, the job offer, the foundation grant, it was all bait? "No," Alexander said firmly. "Maya, your talent is genuine. The opportunities are real. The position with the Philharmonic exists regardless of any external threats. But I won't lie to you. Your success would serve as a powerful example of what's possible when we invest in individual artists." Sarah Chen clicked to another screen, showing financial records and corporate connections.
The people targeting foundation recipients are funded by a consortium of interests, private education companies that profit from reduced public arts funding, investment groups that benefit from keeping cultural institutions cash-strapped, political organizations that use wasteful art spending as campaign talking points. Maya studied the documents, seeing connections between seemingly unrelated entities. How long has this been going on? We've documented cases going back 3 years. Recipients of major grants have been followed, harassed, had their personal information leaked to the media, even faced physical intimidation. Several promising artists have returned grant money rather than deal with the pressure. Elena's voice was tight with controlled anger. And you knew about this before you approached my daughter? Alexander met her gaze directly. I knew about the general threat, yes. But Maya, I need you to understand. These people rely on fear and intimidation to achieve their goals. If we allow them to prevent talented individuals from accepting opportunities, they win without ever having to make their case in the court of public opinion. Maya stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights. Below her, millions of people were living their lives, pursuing their dreams, making difficult choices about risk and reward. What you're saying is that by accepting your help, I become a target, but by refusing your help, I let them win. That's exactly what I'm saying, Alexander confirmed. Maya turned back to the room. What kind of threats are we talking about? What did they do to other people?
Detective Morrison consulted his notes. Harassment ranges from social media campaigns and leaked personal information to more serious physical intimidation. In 2 cases, recipients were followed home, had their families photographed, received threatening messages. One young pianist had her practice studio broken into, her instruments damaged. Elena's face went pale. Maya, we can't— Mom, Maya interrupted. Let me think. She looked around the room at these people who had suddenly become central to her life's direction. Alexander, whose wealth and influence had opened doors she never could have imagined. Sarah Chen and Detective Morrison, whose professional expertise was focused on protecting her from threats she didn't fully understand. And her mother, whose illness had already limited Maya's choices in ways that felt suffocating. If I refuse the position, if I walk away from this opportunity, what happens to the next person? Maya asked. Someone else with talent but no connections, no protection, no wealthy benefactor to provide security. Alexander nodded approvingly. You understand the larger implications. But understanding implications doesn't make me brave enough to face them, Maya said honestly. I have my mother to think about. I have responsibilities that go beyond my personal dreams. Elena struggled to her feet, her movements labored but determined. Maya, sit down. All of you, listen to me. The authority in her voice, the tone that had commanded classrooms and parent conferences for decades, immediately focused everyone's attention. I have pulmonary fibrosis. My doctors have been very clear about my prognosis. I have months, not years, maybe a year if I'm fortunate. She held up a hand to forestall Maya's protest. This is not self-pity or pessimism. This is medical reality. Elena walked slowly to where Maya stood by the windows. Maya, you have sacrificed 3 years of your life to take care of me. You've worked jobs you hated, deferred dreams you deserved, and never once complained about the choices you had to make. But I will not let you sacrifice the opportunity that your grandfather carried across an ocean and your mother worked 3 jobs to support. Maya felt tears starting. Mom, the risks. The risks of living a life without purpose are greater than the risks of fighting for something that matters, Elena said firmly. She turned to address Alexander, Sarah Chen, and Detective Morrison. What kind of protection can you provide? Detective Morrison leaned forward. We can arrange for regular security checks, provide you with communication devices that connect directly to our department, and monitor the individuals we know are involved in the harassment campaign. Sarah Chen added,
The foundation can also provide temporary relocation if necessary, and we have legal resources to pursue restraining orders and criminal charges if threats escalate. Alexander looked directly at Maya. More than that, we can make sure your story gets told the right way. Instead of letting these people control the narrative, we can put you in front of audiences and media that will celebrate your achievements rather than question your worthiness. Maya felt the weight of the decision settling around her like stage lights focusing before a performance. Every significant choice in her life had been about survival, about choosing security over possibility. This was the first time she was being asked to choose courage over comfort. If I do this, if I take the position and accept the foundation support, I want guarantees about my mother's medical care, full coverage, the best doctors, whatever treatment might extend or improve her remaining time. Done, Alexander said immediately. And I want to know everything. No more surprises, no more information revealed in crisis moments. If there are risks, I want to know what they are. If there are political implications, I want to understand them. Sarah Chen nodded. Complete transparency.
And, Maya continued, her voice growing stronger, I want to help identify and protect other artists who might be targeted. This can't be just about me and my career. If we're going to fight this, we fight it for everyone. Detective Morrison smiled for the first time since Maya had met him. Now you're thinking like someone who can make a real difference. Elena returned to her chair, and Maya could see both pride and relief in her mother's expression. There's one more thing, Elena said. Maya, I want to hear you play. Here, now, in this room. Not because these people need to be convinced of your talent, but because I need to be reminded why we're willing to take these risks. Maya looked around the conference room, with its polished table and corporate artwork and view of the city that never slept. It was the least likely concert venue she could imagine, but she opened her grandfather's violin case and removed the instrument. She played Bach's Air on the G string, a piece that had always spoken to her of dignity maintained in difficult circumstances. As the notes filled the room, Maya thought about her grandfather carrying this violin from China to New York, about her mother working 3 jobs to pay for lessons, about Tommy saving for culinary school, and Rita managing the diner with grace and determination. The music transformed the corporate space into something sacred, something human. When Maya finished, the silence held not just appreciation, but understanding. This was what they were protecting, this connection between individual expression and universal truth. Now I remember, Elena said softly, why your grandfather never sold that violin, even when we needed money for rent. Alexander stood and walked to his desk, returning with a folder of documents. Maya, these are contracts for the community outreach position, applications for the foundation grant, and security protocols. Take them home, review them with your mother, and let us know your decision tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Detective Morrison handed Maya and Elena each a small communicator. Emergency communicators, he explained. They connect directly to my phone and to the local precinct. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, use them immediately. The ride home passed in contemplative silence. Elena dozed fitfully against Maya's shoulder while the city streamed past the car windows. Maya held the folder of documents and thought about the strange journey that had brought her to this moment, from playing violin behind a dishwasher to sitting in a billionaire's office discussing security arrangements and media strategies. As they approached their apartment building, Maya noticed that the surveillance team was no longer visible. Either they had withdrawn or they had gotten better at hiding. Neither possibility was particularly comforting. Maya helped Elena up the stairs, both women moving slowly, Elena because of her illness, Maya because of the weight of the decision ahead. In the familiar space of their small apartment, surrounded by medical equipment and modest furniture, the events of the evening seemed almost surreal. Maya, Elena said as they prepared for bed, whatever you decide, make sure you're deciding for yourself, not for me, not for your grandfather, not for Alexander Whitmore. This is your life, your music, your choice. Maya nodded, though she knew the decisions were never made in isolation.
Every choice affected other people, created ripple effects that extended far beyond the individual making the choice. The question was whether she had the courage to accept responsibility for those ripple effects. She lay awake long into the night, listening to her mother's labored breathing and the city sounds filtering through their windows. Somewhere out there, people were making music, pursuing dreams, taking risks that might change their lives. Tomorrow, Maya would join them or step back into the safety of invisibility. The violin case sat beside her bed, waiting patiently for her decision. Maya woke at dawn with her decision crystallized like morning frost. She found Elena already awake, sitting by the window with her oxygen concentrator, watching the sun paint the city gold. "I'm going to do it," Maya said simply. Elena smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. "I know, Micha. I could hear it in the way you played Bach last night. You played it like someone who remembered she was a musician first." 3 months later, Maya stood on the stage at Carnegie Hall, not as the featured soloist she'd once dreamed of becoming, but as part of the Whitmore Foundation's community showcase. Behind her sat 20 other artists who had refused to be intimidated: painters, poets, dancers, musicians. In the audience, Tommy beamed from the front row, wearing his new chef's uniform from the Culinary Institute. The threats had materialized and been overcome. The surveillance had ended in arrests. The Foundation's work continued, stronger for having been tested. As Maya raised her grandfather's violin, she thought of Elena, whose condition had stabilized enough to attend tonight. The music that emerged wasn't technically perfect, but it carried something more valuable: the sound of dreams that had survived everything designed to destroy them. The last note hung in the air like a promise kept. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.